Hey guys, how's it going? It's Josh back again with another movie review, and today we're going to review Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Quantumania is the 31st film in the MCU, and it's the third Ant-Man film. Starring Paul Rudd, who returns as Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, where essentially Lang and the rest of the Ant family get sucked into the quantum realm. There they must figure out how to reunite and escape before Janet Van Dyne's history in the form of Kang the Conqueror, played by Jonathan Majors, catches back up to her. The reactions for this movie are amongst some of the worst MCU reactions from audiences and critics alike. I personally don't feel the same way. However, that doesn't mean this film is without some problems that I will address. But first, let's get into the things that I like. I think the biggest plus of this entire movie, or my favorite thing of pretty much the entire Ant-Man franchise and his other appearances, would be Paul Rudd. He's always been good. That's the one thing I could always count on anytime I went to the theater for these movies. It was Paul Rudd was going to do a good job. He was going to make me laugh. He was going to be the emotional center and be very effective at it. And in all three of his movies, he has. So shout out to Paul Rudd. There's a couple sequences in this film, specifically two, one during like the original village invasion scene. I don't want to spoil too much, as well as the probability storm scene that were so cool looking, but also served a narrative purpose that I have to give a ton of credit for. Specifically, the latter of the two that I mentioned, there's one that is very reminiscent of the Far From Home Mysterio sequence. I don't want to give away too much, but if you see the trailer, you've seen like a tiny portion of it, but I trust me, you haven't seen the entire thing. It is actually a really funny but also very visually stunning sequence. I really like that sequence. I think the humor in this movie works really well, much better than pretty much all of the humor in Phase 4. I don't know if the writers were the same, or maybe it just had something to do with the acting or the directing or the delivery of lines, but I just felt like all of the jokes in this movie, not all, but a very large portion, I found myself laughing at, and not just chuckling to myself or, you know, thinking in my head, oh, that was kind of funny. I actually laughed openly at a ton of the jokes. Even characters who a bunch of reviewers have been saying were poorly designed or very cringy, I laughed at pretty much their entire inclusion in this movie. I think that this movie was written, or at least it feels like it was written by human beings, maybe by people who have comedic timing or, you know, just a better comedic brain, because to be honest with you, especially in the previous Doctor Strange 2 and Thor 4, I just felt like the humor in those films, especially Thor 4, was written by like an AI, you know, using just memes and outdated jokes and things that just wouldn't be funny in 2022. Another thing that I feel like I was kind of worried about in this movie, but as I seen it, obviously my tensions were eased, was I thought that the motivation for the characters, especially Cassie and Janet Van Dyne, was going to be underbaked and frustrating, almost as if, you know, there was pretty much no reason for them to do what they did. The only character motivation in the trailer that I was convinced of was Paul Rudd saving, obviously, his daughter. But as the film went on, Cassie's motivation for doing what she does is kind of taken out of context in the trailer, and when it's explained, it makes you appreciate the blip a little bit more and the consequences of the Avengers' actions in Endgame. But I would have preferred if we had some more development on that. As much as I could see where she was coming from and it wasn't as frustrating as I thought it was going to be, I still think we would have appreciated it more had we seen her desperation to do something like that in the first place, especially if we had her develop over time with a series or a special or something like that. Then I feel like her motivations would be more universally accepted. But like I said, I could understand at least where she was coming from. But Janet's, on the other hand, we'll get into in the section that I didn't like. And I gotta say, no spoilers, but the post-credit scenes in this film, especially one that's related to a Marvel Disney Plus show, are some of the more interesting I've seen in the MCU for quite some time. Alright, and I think it's time to go into the things that I didn't like. Now, this isn't a spoiler. They've kind of revealed that this character's in the film through marketing and stuff like that. But the MODOK character, now, I actually thought it was kind of endearing and, in a weird way, a cute inclusion trying to like wrap up the story of the trilogy. So I really wasn't mad at the character's presence, nor the idea of the character. I think like this has been like a theory on the, you know, the fan theories subreddit for so long, that MODOK would be the Darren character from the first Ant-Man film, considering he shrunk subatomic, but like his body parts got like shrunk individually and stuff like that. I remember seeing something, a theory related to that character. I just think that the way the character was presented in terms of the dialogue and the relationship between all of the characters, I was actually fine with. I just personally think that they could have put, I feel like if they put like maybe like $2 or $3 more million into this character, I wouldn't have been so upset with this design. Anyone who's really been upset with the tone, me personally, I never liked the MODOK character to begin with. I always thought it was incredibly goofy. His inclusion in the Ant-Man movie, especially the tone of these movies in the MCU, I felt like was always going to be appropriate when it was first announced. Like I said, I think the design looks wonky, and a lot more money should have been spent on that if they were going for that. But at the same time, I don't think he was presented bad in terms of his inclusion in the plot up until a certain point, and that would be a spoiler. I don't want to get into it now. Maybe I'll get into it in a live discussion on Twitch or something. But you know, I felt like MODOK's inclusion was actually pretty akin to what I would do with that character, making him like a serious Avengers level threat in the MCU. I feel like wouldn't translate well, considering he's a giant head with baby legs. Jane's motivation for not informing the Ant family about her experience in the quantum realm, you could say to a certain point there's PTSD, or, you know, something in relation to her not being able to express all these dangerous aspects of the quantum realm and coming in contact with it. And, you know, they kind of try to explain that, but to be honest with you, when they're kind of in the thick of it and she's still beating around the bush, it gets really annoying, and you start to question what's like the point of not saying anything at this point. I mean, you're talking about other things, and, you know, it's not like you're saying be quiet for a reason. You're just saying be quiet just because you want to prolong expository dialogue in the film until later. But you know, I just feel like her not telling them about anything in the quantum realm at all not only kind of ruins her character, but ruins the rest of the Ant family. Like, just not mentioning it at all is just so weird to me. Evangeline Lilly as Hope, aka the Wasp, is really given nothing in this film. People have been saying that Michael Douglas and his inclusion in this film is unnecessary. He really does nothing. But to be honest with you, the name of the film is Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Evangeline Lilly does nothing this entire movie. She really serves almost no narrative purpose until maybe the ending, and even then it's like they could have easily just swapped her out with any other character in that position, considering their relationship to the character that, you know, is involved with the conflict at the time. I feel like she's given nothing to do. It honestly feels kind of similar to Neytiri's portrayal in Avatar 2, except at least near the end she's given a little bit of character development, where I feel like Wasp is pretty much the same person at the beginning of this film as she is the end. Like, there's no real change. You never really get her perspective or point of view on the quantum realm or anything involved. She kind of just goes with it, and I feel like they really cheapened, you know, some development for her, considering they haven't really given her any of that in this trilogy. And this is probably my most controversial complaint. Me personally, as someone who actually really enjoys Jonathan Majors as a performer, I feel like this portrayal of Kang was not the phenom he's been described as. I'm sure Majors will perform, you know, a variant of this character in the future that will impress me. Unfortunately, I think that, you know, the Kang the Conqueror portrayal, however, just wasn't it for me. There was nothing that really stood out, no moment, no dialogue, no delivery of dialogue, no facial emotion. Man, I really hope whatever the next version of this character is way more entertaining, because this just felt like a paint by numbers MCU villain to me, and his performance didn't do anything to help that. To be honest with you, I think his performance as He Who Remains in Loki Season 1 was not only more intriguing, but more impactful. Now, I think the most obvious complaint about this movie is that this is the epitome of the generic Marvel format. In my personal opinion, this falls on the side of an enjoyable watch due to how funny and enjoyable the rest of the film was in comparison to just how generic the plot and the beats are. There isn't anything I really hated about this movie. However, it's pretty criminal how little this film adds to the overall variety in the style and formula of the MCU. Outside of maybe the probability storm scene, nothing really steps out of bounds to push the envelope to justify you should see this film very early on, like the weekend it comes out or the Thursday before it comes out, so you're not like spoiled by it. I feel like everything is by the numbers and you can predict pretty much what happens in this movie. This movie isn't the worst thing in the world, nor is it anywhere near one of the worst MCU movies. In fact, I think it might be my favorite Ant-Man movie. I just feel like this film is getting a brunt of the criticism, considering it doesn't do anything stylistically different or tonally different from any of these other movies. It's just, to me, better written than the recent efforts in Phase 4, and it's better written enough to justify my rating, which will be a 7 out of 10. I think it's much better than majority of Phase 4. Thank y'all for watching. I will see y'all in the next review. Let me know what you thought of this movie. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and bye-bye.